It's report card time, and I'm going to do this in real time with you guys. So let's get rolling. The Tennessee football report card in their heartbreaking 44-41 overtime loss to Georgia. Quarterbacks get an A-. A- for quarterbacks. Joey Aguilar gets an A- because of the moxie, how tough he played, and everything in between, throwing for 370 yards. He's the player of the game. He did throw 2 interceptions, though. The second one was very clearly his fault. He missed a couple of throws over the middle. One time he tried to be careful. He shouldn't have been careful because I believe he had Braylon Staley late in the game running on a crossing route. So Joey Aguilar played well, gets an A-, but 2 interceptions you can't overlook, even with the 4 touchdown passes and 374 yards, particularly when the second interception was as clear as day his fault. Running backs B+. And maybe it was the flow of the game, but I don't think Tennessee used their running backs as much. Star Thomas had 9 carries for 60 yards. Deshaun Bishop had 15 carries for 54 yards. Peyton Lewis had 5 carries for 19 yards. If you're counting, that is 29 carries for 133 yards, which is a little under 5 yards a carry. I believe, if I'm doing my math right, see 114, 133, 24, 29. Yep, 29 carries for 133 yards. They could have been better, but they were playing Georgia's defensive line, one of the, a Kirby Smart-led defense. What are you going to do? So I give the running backs a B+ overall. And they were good in pass protection, by the way. They were good in pass pro. They didn't catch any balls out of the backfield, but they were good in pass pro. Moving on, the tight ends. Another A-. Miles Kitzelman had 3 catches for 33 yards. That was all they did, but they were also, again, good in pass pro and good in blocking. So tight ends get an A- too. I give them a lot of credit for the way they played. Wide receivers, A+. No way around it. Wide receivers were superb in this game. And I mean, absolutely superb. The wide receivers, Chris Brazel, as I mentioned, as a torchbearer, had 6 catches for 177 yards and 3 touchdowns. Braylon Staley, though, added 9 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown. Mike Matthews added 5 catches for 59 yards and a touchdown. Those guys were incredible. They were elite. Rodarius Jackson, for good measure, by the way, threw in a 5-yard catch. There is no way around it. The receivers were an A+. There is literally nothing negative I can say about that group. The wide receivers get a huge A+. The offensive line, A-. I talk about the Shamron Umarov and Sam Pendleton penalties late. Those stand out like an Arian Foster fumble in a game. Arian Foster didn't fumble a lot at Tennessee. It's just when he did, they always seem to matter. Those 2 penalties mattered a lot. But outside of that, they ran the ball very well. They only allowed Joey Aguilar to get sacked 1 time, playing against the Georgia defensive line that was that elite. They were very, very, very good. I'll downgrade them to a B+. I'll downgrade them to a B+ because those penalties were just too crucial. You can't make those penalties in that moment. So I'm going to downgrade them to a B+. But overall, the offensive line was very, very, very good, and I give them a lot of credit for what they did. Overall offensive grade is an A. He scored 44 points on a Georgia defense. He had 41 points on a Georgia defense in regulation despite having 2 turnovers. Overall offensive grade, easy A. I don't have to think about it. On the defensive side, defensive line gets a B+. Now, it was an A- until the final couple of drives. They were tired. The lack of depth showed. If Jackson Boy and David Hobbs, by the way, play this game, there's a chance Tennessee wins because they were just too tired in the end on the defensive line. And you saw that Georgia just ran it down their throats in overtime, and that's what pushes them to a B+. But they were outmatched, and they were tired. And up until that point, they played very, very, very well. Defensive line still gets a B+. I don't hold it against them for not getting into the A range. It's just that they got tired in the end. Edge rushers get an A+. A+. Caleb Herring, Joshua Josephs, Jordan Ross, these edge rushers get an A+. They were incredible. Combining Caleb Herring and Jordan Ross for 2 sacks, 3.5 tackles for a loss, with 4.5 when you add Joshua Joseph and a pass deflection in Joshua Joseph with the strip sack. The edge rushers easily get an A+. Okay, so moving on. I got to go to the back end. The linebackers, C-. They stopped the run well, but they let Gunnar Stockton with his mobility torch them at times, and they could have easily contained things better. And Gunnar Stockton made plays over the middle. They allowed way too many of those to happen. Arian Carter did lead the team in tackles with 13 total and had 3 solo, but he made way too many mistakes in this game. I can't get past it. Arian Carter in coverage has shown too many issues, and he's got to improve. And Jeremiah Thielander was the same way with 7 total tackles, 2 of which were solo. They both were just, again, in coverage, they were bad. I can't get past it. They were bad in coverage. It was a problem all night. And because of that, I'm giving Arian Carter and the linebacker unit a C-. There's a reason Gunnar Stockton made so many plays. Secondary, D. Lucky it's not an F. Way too many pass interference penalties on the day. Far too many pass interference penalties on the day. Now, again, secondary, to their defense, was playing without Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson III. Not having those 2 guys was going to be a problem long term, but at the same time, they still could have done better than they did. I want to get to Michael Palmer, who had a great point earlier with the secondary. Safeties are a liability. Redmond got picked on and did not get support over the top. I agree, Michael. I've actually been very critical of the safeties all year. I don't think they're that good. I think Tennessee should be. I don't know why Jordan Thomas is not starting. He hasn't hit the transfer portal, and they lost Jacoby Thomas in the offseason. That was a big deal. But Andre Turntine was never that good. He has not been that good since he was at Tennessee. He's an experienced player, but he's not that athletic. He's just not. And Idris Farouk is just not good. And I agree. There was no safety help. You can talk about Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson III being out, but you should still be able to provide safety help over the top. Jermon McCoy being in there should help you be more elite, honestly. Now we're seeing last year, Jermon McCoy was just covering for safeties, particularly Andre Turntine, because he was able to lock down one side of the field. Colton Hood, solid cornerback. Jalen McMurray, solid cornerback. Boo Carter, still good in the star position. And Ty Redmond developing. You got to love the way he plays, but Ty Redmond made too many mistakes. He's a true freshman. He's going to get better. But Colton Hood is not a guy. You can't play Hood Island the way you can McCoy Island, and that showed in this game. And then the overall defensive grade is C. They gave it 44 points, 38 in regulation. So, yeah, overall defensive grade is a C. By the way, correction, when I said offensive 41 points, they scored 38 points in regulation, but still gave 38 points. Defensive grade is a C. They let Gunnar Stockton play too well. Now, place kicking. Guys, I was ready to write out A+ for place kicking. Max Gilbert had nailed a 48-yarder. And by the way, he also nailed a field goal beyond 40 yards in overtime. He had 2 40-yarders in the game, perfect on extra points. All but one of Josh Tuberville's kicks went for a touchback. But then comes the game-winning kick that you're supposed to make. It's your moment to be famous as a kicker, and Max Gilbert hooks it. That pushes his grade to a B-. It's still above average because you hit 2 40-yarders, including 48-yarder, and Josh Tuberville kicks a bunch of kickoffs for a touchback. But you missed that 42-yarder, your grade is pushed down to a B-. Sorry, that's just the way it goes for field goal kicking. Punting, on the other hand, A-. Jackson Ross had 2 punts that pinned Georgia inside the 12-yard line or closer. One was a 57-yarder and pinned him right on the 4-yard line, but he also only had a 5-yarder at one point that pinned Georgia, not at midfield, but reasonably close. That's what pushes his grade down to an A-. But overall, Jackson was still fine. Return game, it's an F. Actually, no, it's a D. It's a D because they didn't actually lose the return, but Boo Carter fumbled his 1 punt return. There were no kickoff returns. Fumbled his 1 punt return. It wasn't that big of a deal, but Boo Carter fumbled his 1 punt return, and that's enough to say that return game is a D. And the overall special teams grade is a B because the place kicking was the most important of the 3, and that B- outweighs everything else. So we give them a B, 1-letter grade up, but that's because of the punting. And the return game, it doesn't bring it down because it was mediocre. So return game gets a B. All right, now offensive play calling. Okay, I'm going to get to Josh Heupel and his decisions to settle late. I don't consider that offensive play calling. I consider that head coach strategy. Actual offensive play calling when they had to move the ball was perfect. It was an A+. There was no problem with the offensive play calling. I'm going to get to them settling for that 38-yard field goal or the 48-yard field goal late where they ran it 3 times. That's not offensive play calling. That's a strategy to settle for a field goal. But actual play calling, it's an A+. All right, now here's my really hot take. You guys are going to think I'm crazy on this, and I'm going to go ahead and go to this. There is a ton of criticism of Tim Banks tonight, and we need to back off of that. Everybody needs to back off criticizing him. Tim Banks was coaching this game. Let me just remind you guys what he was dealing with. 2 of his top 3 defensive tackles were out of this game against a top 5 team, one of the most talented teams in the country. His top 2 cornerbacks were out against one of the top 5 teams in the country. I don't know where you guys think that Tim Banks, without his top 2 cornerbacks and without his top 2 defensive tackles, was going to all of a sudden show out and put together a master performance. I'm sorry. Tim Banks gets an A- for his defensive play calling. He brought pressure when he needed to. He made sure his guys got pressure around the edges. He's got linebackers who struggled in coverage, safeties who were committing far too many penalties. Tim Banks was playing and coaching massively shorthanded tonight. The play of the defense was the problem, but the play of the defense comes down to the fact that a lot of these guys shouldn't be starting right now because the guys who should be are hurt. 4 starters are hurt on defense, guys. 4. That's a really big deal. I don't know where you guys think that Tim Banks was supposed to call some epic game with that. He gets an A-. He gets an A-, and I know people are going to criticize me for that, but he gets an A-, and I think the actual play calling, when it mattered, was superb. The play calling was superb throughout. The issue, and this is my last take, was the head coaching in-game decisions. Michael, you asked a great question with Tim Banks. Why is there not safety help to help the freshman corner? A couple of reasons. I think 1, Tim Banks was worried more at times about Gunnar Stockton over the middle of the field. But 2, I think the safeties are just not athletic and not that good. They get caught out of position all the time. And you pointed out they are limited at safety. They're severely limited, and it's a problem. So I'm just going to say that, look, Tim Banks, I got no problem with the way he called the game. I'm only giving him an A- just because he had 38 points. I could have given him an A+. I got no issue with the way Tim Banks coached this game. There were way more issues with the defense beyond Tim Banks. Overall head coaching grade is a C, though. Even though the play calling is in the A range, the head coaching grade is a C. Josh Heupel made too many mistakes. Punting forward on 4th and 2 in a shootout in the first half, huge mistake. You were 4th and 2 near midfield. You got to go for that. Second half, settling for the field goal, a 48-yarder, which you hit to get a 38-30 lead, though, when you need to put your foot on the throats of Georgia, when you have the ball up 35-30 with 5 minutes left in the 4th quarter, you got to go for the jugular. Not doing that, crucial mistake. It's Georgia. It's Kirby Smart. They will come back. And then trying to get cute on the final drive of regulation that results in a 42-yard field goal from the left hash mark where it didn't have to be that way. Those in-game decisions are critical, and it pushes Josh Heupel's grade down to a C.